All right, here we are. Paul, you're here with me again. It's been a while. It's been, I think, 6 months since we had a chat here on the channel. And I remember our previous 2 chats that we did. They were very inspiring because
they were fun.
You are not a PHP developer, and yet we can learn so much from each other. Like just going across language boundaries and seeing all the good and the bad stuff in other communities and languages it's a great way to learn from each other, and it's really inspiring. So I invited you here once again. You told me you had some exciting things to talk about, and here we are. I don't have much more context, actually. You said it was something about type systems.
Sure.
And the people on this channel, well, they know I like type systems. So, you had me there. You didn't have to say anything more. I was just like, okay, Paul, let's do it. So maybe, Paul, for like the people who haven't seen the previous videos before, quick introduction, who you are and what you're doing here.
Sure. Thanks, Brent, for having me back. That was a lot of fun.
Right.
And it's exactly the way you described it. We see some of these things happening across the 3 languages that we hang out in: PHP and Python and TypeScript. Briefly, I'm a developer advocate at JetBrains. In my talks, I always say, best job in the world. I feel like I should be paying them my salary, but don't tell them I said that. And I have a long background in simple programming languages like Python. Never did Java, C++, C, C#, any grown-up languages. So it remains hilarious that I'm here talking to you about typing because I don't know jack.
So nice. But, well, honestly, I only know PHP by heart. So, I mean, we're in the same boat, honestly.
That's right.
Did you like never write any Java or C or any of those kinds of languages? Never?
I can't even write a regular expression.
Oh, but that I can. But I had to learn it. Okay. I did. I had some Java in college, like the classic programming course, But after that, I moved to PHP, and I never came back to the big boy.
For me, it's like, what's this compile thing you talk about?
Exactly. Yeah. But this is like such a great concept in languages like Python and PHP, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want to program without it. On the other hand, I have to admit, over the past years, PHP has been moving more toward an opt-in, stronger type system. I'm not going to say strong type system.
Well said.
I'm not going to say strict type system because
well said.
The way PHP does it is very interesting, but it makes it work to an extent that you can say like 95% of the use cases that are can be solved with static analysis are now solved in PHP. If you want to run like a static analyzer, or if you use an IDE, or a combination of the two. And I really love that because you still get like, I'm writing some code and I'm pressing refresh and it's just all there and I don't have to compile anything, but still there's a static analyzer in the background checking for, whether I'm making mistakes, and it occasionally tells me about them and I can fix them. So yeah, it's
100% agree that all 3 of these languages seem to be adding stronger type. Maybe we should say something really clickbaity and get some comments like,
okay,
Python doesn't have types.
Oh yeah.
Python strongly typed. But what you described is really interesting. We covered this, I think, in the last one, that all 3 languages roughly in the same time period started to go through this journey of gradual typing.
Right. Yeah.
You could do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You could do a little over there, nothing over there. You could be really OCD and turn on strict and get yelled at constantly. But as you do this, you get this payback in the IDE of red squiggles.
Right.
So that you fail faster.
Exactly.
So rather than failing in front of your customers in production, or rather than having to write a test that hopefully triggers that failure and failing later when you run your tests, you can fail as you're typing And that is a much more immediate way to fix things.
Yeah.
It's actually one of the topics I wanted to talk to you about if we wind up getting some time.
We will get some time, and I'm already super excited about it because like in the developer ecosystem survey that we do with JetBrains every year, for PHP, we actually ask how many people are using a static analyzer. And what's interesting is that over the past couple of years, that number has been rising and rising.
There you go.
Like consistently. And that's super interesting because I remember 5 years ago, people were, or maybe 10 years ago, people were saying, yeah, PHP is not going to work. It's becoming more and more like Java and people don't want it. It should be a scripting language. But apparently people do like it. And we see the same trends happening in Python, apparently. I don't know anything about Python, but you're about to tell me some things, I hope. But JavaScript as well, right? And you know a thing or two about JavaScript also. So
sure. And you bring up the point that is fascinating for me is the static analysis.
Mm-hmm.
When things can move to static analysis, then tooling can help you.
Mm.
And tooling is a good thing, but traditionally our three communities have not really embraced it. And there's still a lot of culture behind just open up a file and start typing.
Right.
But people doing larger projects with teams are starting to see some of these benefits, but they want to keep the other benefits from a dynamic language as well.
Mm.
So since our last conversation, I've been going on my little journey from my little pea brain exposure to typing and reaching some higher levels of Zen. Our friend and colleague, Khalid Abahakma, thinks it's so cute. He's from C#, so he's been doing this compiler type stuff forever. He's like, oh, wow, cute. You're in first grade now.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things I want to talk about. And whenever you're ready, share my screen and we'll start with TypeScript.
Right. Let's do that right now. Here you go.
All right. Is it okay if I jump into it?
Yeah, go ahead.
And talking to any of you out there, feel free to tell me if you've come to a similar realization. But in TypeScript, especially on this large project we have at JetBrains, it's a code base with a number of people and we're doing TypeScript. We're doing it pretty seriously. And I was always thinking of, I've got a component and it's the call E. Something's going to call it, like the parent component. Parent component is going to call it, pass in some props. I'm the callee. And as the child component, I need to be able to do this, that, and that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my interface to the outside world. So somebody needs to hand me this stuff. Mm. And I was always thinking of it in terms of typing the caller.
Mm.
Where the caller's contract that said I'm a page needs to include all of my contract. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about it from a type perspective. To be more specific, I was thinking about it from a nominal typing perspective. Mm. In Python, and I think this is computer science theory, there's nominal typing and there's structural typing.
Yeah, you might have to explain that a little bit. I know what it's about, but I only recently understood it.
Nominal is known as the ISA typing. Nominal type ISA means, hey, you're a duck.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody hands me a value that's a duck, and I can say, this is a duck. And a duck is a mammal, superclass, and a mammal's an animal, superclass. And these type systems all generate the ISA. A duck is a mammal. A duck is an animal. A duck is not an insect.
Mm-hmm.
But what I realized was what was happening was my parent types were becoming garbage barges of everybody's contract.
Mm.
Every child component's needs had to be put onto the page. And you might see this in some frameworks and stuff that want to have a really flat API. And the freaking API docs are 50 pages long with deprecated crap all over the place for the one edge case where somebody somewhere at some time needed that thing.
Right. Yeah.
Well, with TypeScript, and what we see on the page is a component called the base layout, and it's got a this context and props that are passed in. And I need to kind of tell the outside world what I expect. And I'll look at the shape of the context object. What I started to realize was in the past, I would go and find the caller and find out its type and extend it to have every one of these things.
Right.
Well, in TypeScript, you're just not even doing typed data like classes. You're doing just dumb as a rock JavaScript objects.
Right. Yeah.
Almost like JSON. And you use TypeScript to impose shape, not type.
Yeah.
And once you start thinking in terms of shape, not type, you're thinking of structural typing instead of nominal typing. Instead of saying this thing is a duck, you just say this thing quacks.
Right.
Or for my purposes, the only thing I care about is quacking. I don't care about swimming. So hand me something that quacks. Ironically, I chose duck actually by accident. So it works well. Because what they say is if it quacks like a duck, if it swims like a duck, looks like a duck, it's a duck. And so they call it duck typing.
Duck typing.
That nominal typing is just about the shape of the thing, not the ISA of the thing.
The structural typing, you mean?
Structural typing. Sorry. Yes. Thank you for correcting me.
Hey,
structural typing is just about the shape of the thing. So this is the callee. This is the thing being called. And so I started putting all the stuff I expected here. It had two consequences. One, the other thing didn't become a garbage barge with every possible thing.
Right, right.
And that was really frustrating for me in testing. When I wanted to test this thing, I had to construct one of these things that had every possible piece of data on it.
Yeah. Gotcha.
When really, these are the only things I care about.
Yeah.
So I started putting the shape on the call E and what it expected. And it had a secondary benefit that I'm basically telling you everything I need to do my job that's down here.
Yeah.
So when you walk up to this thing 6 months later, you can kind of see, hey, this thing needs to get the site title from the metadata object.
Yeah.
It needs to get what version of 11D.
Yeah.
Was whatever. And in a good IDE, if you go and extract these things from the data and then you change your mind down here and stop using it, please work. It will tell you, hey, your contract has something that's no longer used. You can go fix that. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk with you about was this kind of realization of mine. Instead of putting everything into types and putting it in the caller side, to try and move things over to the callee side. Does that fit your brain?
This is super interesting. I want to share a thought about more specifically about structural and nominal typing.
Sure.
Oh, interesting. Now it's highlighted. Like the code. It didn't, like a second ago, it wasn't highlighted. Anyway.
Oh, I did an undo on removing it.
Okay.
I put it back.
Okay. I was thinking, and I'm not kidding you. Like I said, we didn't talk about what you wanted to talk about today, not in depth. So I didn't know you were going this route.
Sure.
Yesterday, I was thinking about PHP, and like PHP, it's all nominal typing, right? There's no difference, no other way to do it, and I used to be a big fan of that. I remember when I used them at a previous company at Spatie, we used to have a couple of discussions with colleagues, people who started using TypeScript and talking about structural typing, but I didn't really understand it back then. And I was like, no. The way I know is the best. Yesterday, I was thinking about traits in PHP, which it's not the same as this, but basically like composing an object, a class, out of several different traits. In PHP, you cannot type in you cannot check on the trait itself because the trait is just compile time, copy paste into the class. Basically, it doesn't generate a type or anything. I was like, oh, I would so love to be able to, step away from the nominal typing and move more towards this class. It doesn't really matter what name it has. I just want to be sure that it has these methods and these properties so I can do this with it. And I don't really care about where it comes from or what kind of interface, what kind of name it has gotten. And so that's really interesting because the things you're sharing here, I know you were also talking about splitting it up in the right place, basically moving these structural types to the child component. Can I say it like that? Yeah. So that's interesting as well. But as you can see, it's just triggering a lot of thoughts here. And
sure, yeah.
I'm just sharing whatever comes to mind here. So really interesting. And
I'm glad you're doing that because it's triggering some things in me that I'm not good enough to know what are the anti-patterns and code smells. Like you just mentioned something about composition. In TypeScript, you have type and interface, and I see a lot of people doing interface because it's the newer thing. But I think they say in TypeScript, use a type when you want to be as specific as possible.
Right.
But you can also construct types out of parent as a union of parent types with something like base type. I might have the ampersand wrong. I think it might be a single ampersand or something like that.
Yeah.
But then you start mixing these things together and it starts to feel like all that danger people had about multiple inheritance. That multiple inheritance is considered a code smell and an anti-pattern. And so there's a lot of wisdom about this, about building resilient systems and, doing all of this is extra work. As you said in TypeScript, unlike Python, in TypeScript, this is all thrown out at runtime.
Right. Yeah.
This is only to help the programmer, not the program.
True. Traits, by the way, PHP. I'm just putting it out there. Exactly the same. Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Doesn't matter at runtime.
So you have to have an audience of people willing to type a little bit more now to type a little bit less later.
Well, actually, a lot less later.
A lot less. Yeah. That's
better. In my experience, it pays off to do it this way. Because you gain a lot more time and insights into your code base.
Is it okay if I switch over to Python and talk about the next thing kind of connected to this thing?
Definitely. Go ahead. Yeah.
Sure.
So I know a little bit of JavaScript. I know nothing of Python. So this will be even more gibberish for me. But
sure.
Let's see. Apparently Python is written in dark mode.
Meaning wrong mode.
Yeah, wrong mode. Exactly. You have a little bit of an error there, Paul. Although the IDE isn't picking up on it, apparently.
Python has an interesting story in compared to TypeScript. And we talked about this in the last call that it was a shock to me that the world of JavaScript would pick up on this before Python because JavaScript just seemed totally hostile to doing your push-ups.
Right. Yeah.
Python remains a good bit hostile to it, but the latest Python survey shows a good bit of people are starting to do some gradual typing or a lot of typing.
Cool.
But Python's history, is it okay if I spend 1 minute on how we got here for Python?
Yeah, would love to.
Python, obviously, like PHP, is you don't write down your types. It infers the types. I mean, there's still types under the hood, but you don't type your types.
Right. Yeah.
And long ago in my previous life, the folks at my company submitted something in, I think, 2002, maybe. We had a system that was an extension of Python called interfaces to do interface contract programming in Python. Okay. We submitted it for acceptance by the Python community. Guido rejected it in favor of something that was coming.
Okay.
And a few years later, the thing that arrived was something called ABC's abstract base classes. where you write down something that looks like a class, but if you're from another programming language, you might be familiar with marking something as abstract means you'll never make an instance of that class. You'll just derive from that class. But you're spelling things about what the subclasses should look like. Equally, you're doing nominal typing. So if I have an abstract base class called animal, and I say nothing is ever going to be an instance of animal, but mammal will subclass and say I implement animal. More importantly, it's an is-a. Mammal is a animal. Duck is a mammal and also is a animal.
A duck is
so you use what's that?
Is a duck a mammal?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, duck is the bird. Sorry.
Go ahead. But duck is a mammal. In this case, it is. Okay, yeah.
Hey, if I subclass from it, it is a mammal.
Yeah.
Trust the compiler. So duck is a bird, which is an animal. And in these cases, you're doing nominal typing, is a, et cetera, and you're doing some attempt at specifying the contract that and the shape and things like that, and you can reason about it. But ABCs wound up having a number of sharp edges over the years.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And Python had always embraced the duck typing approach. And so they formalized a few releases ago a concept called protocols, which feel a little bit like interface. Yeah. It's where you talk about the shape of something rather than the type of something.
Gotcha.
And you don't walk up to duck and say, I declare this duck to be a bird. Instead, consumers of those things will say, hey, there's this protocol called duck and it expects swim and quack. Some other thing that has no knowledge of you, no knowledge of your system, no knowledge of this duck, bird, mammal, animal crap, can quack and swim,
right,
and it will work for your thing. So it makes for this really cool effect of action at a distance. Things I don't control. I don't control your code. I can't go and fork it and say implements bird. But on my side, I can say, I think you handed me a bird.
Yeah.
And if you didn't, somebody in static analysis is going to get mad.
Right.
Cool so far?
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's a totally different concept of what I'm used to. So
it hurt. I'm doubly struggling with it because in that previous system called Zope, we did interface programming, and when you make a thing, you say, I'm a thing.
Yeah.
And everybody knows you're a thing. And I keep wanting to go back to the caller side and say, that's a duck. So this is an example of a protocol in Python.
Okay.
And you define your protocols by subclassing from something called a protocol. And then after that, it looks like a class. It looks like something more specifically, a data class. And it doesn't have any implementation. And in this case, let me think about this. Will I be able to find this on the... In this case, it doesn't have any methods, but I'm in here. Okay. So this is a protocol that does have methods.
Okay.
But the ... means it's abstract, doesn't have an implementation.
That is.
And here's a method that returns something that doesn't have an implementation.
This is like a total detail, but this is so beautiful of Python. Like in PHP, we write abstract public.
Oh, okay.
Very verbose. And actually in like when I write blog posts about it, when I you write the curly brackets as well, and I always put 3 little dots there.
That's cool.
and Python is like combining it here for apps. This is so nice. It feels like a very like in PHP we say a very Laravel way of doing it, because Laravel has, like, the framework has kind of embraced this very like eloquent way of writing code. This is syntax, of course. Laravel completely influenced that, but I know I'm getting sidetracked, but I just really like this. I wish we could define like abstract methods with just ...
Sure.
So,
right.
sorry for the sidetrack.
Yeah, no problem.
You were saying like this protocol has methods.
Yeah. So the realization for me that I wanted to talk about here, and this is kind of aimed a little bit more at a Python crowd. Well, no, it's kind of a pattern. Is the system that we're writing needs to be able to branch basically based on kinds of things. Think of it like single dispatch if there are some computer science-y people out there. So this is using the new-ish Python syntax called structural Python matching. It's like those of you from other languages who say that's a switch statement. It's a switch statement with a PhD because it's got some smarts, but we're not using them in this case. What I wanted to point out is I am matching on a protocol,
right?
Not a type, which means I can be handed stuff I never expected.
Yeah.
I can be handed a type that is shaped like this protocol, but isn't an HTML. I know nothing about you. You know nothing about me, but we still work together because we know what we expect from each other. Yeah. And this is a very flexible way of doing resilient code bases, especially in ecosystems with plugins and communities and lots of people that want to plug things together.
Ooh. Oh, Paul, I'm getting so you know how we solved this in PHP. We have there's only nominal typing, right? So we need interfaces, and they need to be shared everywhere if you want some kind of interoperability between code bases. So there is this group of PHP programmers who define a set of interfaces. It's called the FIG, the Framework Interoperability Group. Yeah. Okay. And they go through great lengths to make sure that there are interfaces for everything you can think of. There are some things that make sense, but there are also some things that really don't make sense. That do we really need an interface for a clock with one method, for example, for testing purposes? No, but yeah, and like I've shared my opinion about.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but I've shared my opinion about it a couple of times before. I think the FIG did great work, but some of the standards they come up with, they don't feel right to me. And this is interesting because you can actually boil it down to, in PHP, we kind of need stupid interfaces if we want some kind of interoperability between different code bases. While in here with nominal typing, if it quacks like a duck and flies like a duck and acts like a duck, well, it's probably a duck. Let's try it out. Let's see if it works. I do wonder, Paul, this is the question that's on my mind. Doesn't this cause bugs in some cases, that something that just happens to have the same shape as HTML here, but isn't meant to be compatible with this? And like this code here thinks, oh yeah, it's HTML, let's just work with it, while the output it might generate might have nothing to do with that case here. Does that ever happen, or is that's just my nominal typed mind that cannot really grasp the flexibility of this and tries to come up with excuses?
In a transparent attempt to evade a difficult question, and then when I get back to it, I will evade it again. I'm going to ask you a question and make a point, and then get on to your questions. All right? In the FIG example, let's say that they make the canonical definition of a POSIX directory.
Yeah, could be.
Cool.
Yeah.
And they publish in their package, in some namespace, POSIX directory.
Right. Yeah.
And then some other package wants to make something that says I'm a POSIX directory, do they have to say implements fig POSIX directory?
Yes.
So this is a way out of that.
Yeah. I
This
know.
is a neat way for decoupled systems.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which I find pretty compelling and interesting. And this is the thing that I was really late to understand because I had this whole implements interface baked in my brain. So the second thing is something I wanted to point out was, and I need to write a blog post about this.
Okay.
On a site that allows you to omit the www from a
You had a problem with your blog there, but let's not go into
my
that.
My blog doesn't exist yet. Shut up. In the currently shipping version of Python, I don't believe this works.
Oh, okay.
You couldn't do, I'm almost positive the version before that, you couldn't do a case statement on a protocol because the protocol wasn't a type.
Right. Yeah.
And I had previously found a number of cases where Python's type tooling really wanted a type. And I would hand it a protocol and it would get pissed off. So this is still an emerging thing for Python.
Right. Yeah.
So therefore, I will use the emerging theme in a half answer for you. I don't really know what the whole is. I'll bet you there's someone listening to this who's a grown up.
Exactly.
And did the math. And they know type theory and sets and all that crap. And can say, nope, this is good enough. And I can prove it with a formula.
Right. Yeah.
That if all I do, if I've got a chunk of code and I say, here's what I need, and you give that, I can prove it will not have any errors.
Yeah.
As long as the assertions in the protocol are rich enough.
Yeah.
Now, if you get into like a number under 100, you probably can't spell that in a protocol.
You can in some languages, but
Right. Yeah.
PHP.
In the ones that didn't add this capability while the plane was in the air.
The languages that we're not using, Paul, because we're...
Okay, so this is the second thing I wanted to show you was this kind of adaptable, resilient system thing where if you switch from type to shape, if you switch from nominal to structural, test writing becomes easier because you don't have to create an instance of a thing.
Right.
You just hand it a pile of data with the right stuff in it.
That is super interesting. That to me, like, is, you mentioned it at the very beginning as well. That sounds like mind blowing. You know what lengths we need to go through in PHP. I'm thinking about like mocking frameworks, for example. Like the whole debate about final classes. People don't like them because you run into so many problems because we need to be able to extend classes because we want to be able to test them. Like all of that, it goes away. That's
let me ask you a question about your crowd.
Yeah, my crowd. Yeah,
your channel folks.
Yeah.
Do they do testing?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I love you guys.
Oh yeah,
girls.
Testing is like I would dare to say pretty big thing in PHP. Yeah. Not everyone, but like,
way to go, y'all.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to wrap up this point, there's a book in Python about writing bigger systems using architectural patterns from the gang of whatever, 7, 12, 5, I don't know. And a lot of those patterns can really be served well by having these kind of protocol interface style instead of nominal typing.
Yeah. Super interesting.
Yep.
It really is. I think like the closest thing we can compare it to in PHP right now are traits, but it's not really true because we cannot do any like matching on traits, for example. But it's super interesting, and I'm I don't know. I'm leaning more and more towards this kind of type system. It sounds more fun.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Well, to get out of just the fun and the practical aspect, like better test writing and stuff like this, there's another topic, if you don't mind, I'd like to zoom out to. Is that all right?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Before closing up with a point about testing. Large systems. We in open source, you, me, different communities, whatever, have a lot of like frameworks that are their own little ecosystems, right? And you can, with this system, you can plug in middleware, you can have the middleware chain, you can have components that you plug in, you can have little processors that get plugged in, pluggability. And from that system that we did back in the kind of early days of Python, we had this large scale ecosystem of pluggable components, companies all over the world doing things, and we learned a lot about it. And it was just really valuable. And what seems to happen a lot these days is somebody ships a 10-line program and it takes off. Becomes a 100-line program, and then it takes off, and then it becomes a large ecosystem, and they have to add an architecture on afterwards, and making something to share with other people winds up being magic at every turn. Put a file named this in this directory.
Yeah. Oh,
and subclass from this class, and implement this method, and return this kind of, and I hate that. It's not a way to construct a quality ecosystem. Then there are some more expanded ideas, and this was something that we were good at, and this is going to be the next thing I do in Python and part of TypeScript is, let's say that somebody ships a theme. Are themes big in PHP?
A theme?
Yeah. Like HTML themes with good CSS design.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How do you consume a theme in PHP?
In Laravel, I would say it's usually like it's these presets with a lot of Tailwind and probably some.
But how do you get it on your system? Do you install a package and start using it, or do you have to get a Git repo of files and plop it down in your?
No, you install a package. Usually it's a Composer package, which is the PHP package manager.
Sweet. In the JavaScript system that I'm currently working on, and I think it's that way in Jekyll too, and probably Hugo, you make your repo from the very beginning based on that theme. And from then on, you are divorced and forked from that stuff.
Really?
It's not package. There aren't shippable themes. It's just artifacts in files in your directory.
Okay.
So that's you're already at a level of Zen. So I've got this theme, and I like everything about it except that box with the logo.
Yeah.
Are you able to override that box with the logo without forking it? Or do you have to go change the caller to call your thing?
It depends. I would say like with Laravel, they actually ship with a couple of like presets, they call it. Like
plug
presets.
Points. They've defined the places that you can override.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's configuration. It's not really overriding.
No, what you can also do, what they allow to do is like you install the package and then you have commands to publish some of the files. And basically that means pulling the files out of the package. Basically what you described here, pulling the files out of the package into your own repository, your own project, and then do whatever you want with it.
Sure.
Basically. So yeah, that's the same as with you, but just
Yeah. So can I describe a system of pluggability based on these ideas of shape and stuff like that?
Yeah.
The heritage I come from allows me to write a component in my side without touching where I got the theme from.
Yeah.
And just making a decorator that says, hey, I'm that. And whenever you ask for that, you actually get me. Or even better, I'm that, but only on this page.
Okay.
or for this kind of page like resource, or only under these conditions.
Right. Yeah.
And without the other side even making the plug point, because we're all using these shape of things kind of things, we can do an override.
Right.
A conditional override. And it just feels like a larger ecosystem of pluggable components and software where I can say, I know the shape of that thing and I'm one of them, and use me instead.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think?
It sounds very flexible. And yeah, it's very intriguing to me. At the same time, I'm still like thinking about, okay, but there are catches here.
Sure.
Yeah. But honestly, there are catches to the other system as well, to the other approach. So
one of the biggest catches is the framework is in between the caller and the callee, and that always feels like magic to people. Yeah, like, I'll never be able to trace the system anymore.
Right. Yeah.
But as it turns out, we've all kind of decided we could handle that a long time ago. Most modern web systems have views, and you register a view. Yeah. And the system calls your view.
Yeah. I actually, Paul, don't tell anyone, but like as a hobby project, I work on a little framework and I do live streams about it on this channel as well. Anyway, just side note there. I can relate.
Sure. Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah.
By the way, when you see me blinking, everybody, this is my camera's fault. This isn't Brent's fault.
Oh yeah. I just thought you were getting ready for the after party or something, but
okay, last point I wanted to talk about and see if we can get any feedback from these smart folks in the audience. A long time ago, the team lead for PyCharm, Andrei Vlasovsky, educated me on all of this. And he said, one of the hidden benefits of typing is it can eliminate a whole bunch of tests.
Right. Yeah. I agree.
And I'm really interested in that. Obviously, they're the dumb as a rock testing kinds of things that you can do. Hey, give me an integer. And now I don't have to test my system for what happens if I give it a float. But there's like TypeScript. Oh my gosh, they have put in 5 years of esoteric voodoo into TypeScript to express these rules that are just really astonishing. So I wonder how much further you could go with typing in the interest of eliminating tests. Do you have any thinking on that?
I'm going to give you a very balanced answer there, Paul.
All right.
You need both, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And you need to make sure that you don't like go haywire to one side, basically. I've seen like some TypeScript examples, type definitions, 2 pages long, that I'm like, and this cannot be the best maintainable code. I know I did some reading into type systems and like the set theory that you mentioned a couple of years
Links
ago.
are in the show notes, right?
Yeah, I did write a blog post about it afterwards. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. But you know, in theory, you can do a lot with your type system. And if you had the most flexible type system in the world, you wouldn't need to write any tests in theory. But look, all of our type systems are flawed for every programming language. They have their limitations. So I don't believe that a type system can catch all bugs, but I do believe they help a lot. I mean, I chose to use types in PHP. I chose to do that like 10 or 8 years ago, and PHP gradually got more and more support for it. It's a bit more typing. So, and I can promise you, if it wasn't worth it, I wouldn't do it anymore. It is so worth it. So yes, there definitely are a lot of things that can be simplified. And there are some tests that don't have to be written. However, you need both. That's my opinion. Is that a balanced answer?
I think that's one particularly interesting thing in your answer was this assertion that the hypothetical ideal type system would eliminate all tests. I guess the Haskell people are out there like, that's us.
Yeah.
That's us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it gives us reason to aspire to do better, to try and reach that point, to invest in learning more than just the minimum to get the IDE to stop yelling at you.
True.
As it turned out, I was doing pair programming on something we're trying to get into Python on Saturday with the guy who was the maintainer of Jython, the Java implementation of Python. And we put the type hints in, and PyCharm yelled at us about something because it was, and we hadn't written a test for it yet. It would work with a list, but not a generator.
Right. Yeah.
And ultimately, we were going to need a generator. And so we would have failed obscurely at some point, but we failed immediately because the little bit extra work to get the typing right told us we had a flaw.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't write PHP without types anymore.
Yeah.
And all of that comes from the insights that you get from an IDE and static analysis tools. I mean, I'm not writing those types because I like to write more. I'm writing them because they are saving a lot of time for me.
Interestingly, in Python, types have taken off because Python does keep them around at runtime.
Yeah, PHP as well.
Okay, right. And so a couple of web API systems, notably Fast API, have put this to work so that you get a lot of benefits from putting it in your endpoints.
Yes, this is something that's like very, very like it happens a lot in PHP as well. Like we create controller actions, and like one of the route parameters would be an ID, for example. And instead of like getting that ID as a method parameter, you just type hint on like the concrete like model name, model type you want, and behind the scenes the framework will go to the database, use the ID from the URL, map it to the model, and give you the model instead, all based on the type information. So the kinds of things are pretty cool. Yeah.
Do you have any systems that do like dependency injection or IOC based on types?
Yeah. It's basically
that's just great.
Yeah, it's not the only approach, but it's like the most common approach in most.
So instead of these magic names, you can say a type.
Just use the types. Yeah. I actually fairly recently I wrote like a dependency container.
All right.
That framework where I did exactly that. Yeah, I did a live stream on the channel as well. If people want to check it out, where you can see the struggle. But like, yeah, it's great.
Good for you for doing that, both for writing it, but also kind of documenting and educating on it, and then getting some people in who've done similar things and see where these ideas go.
Yeah, it's really fun. It really is. Okay, Paul, we had a lot of things that we talked about. Super inspiring again. Like we live in two very different worlds, very different communities, and yet there is so much we talk about, and that is like recognizable. And I think like, people who are watching this video will also be able to share their thoughts in the comments here, and we can learn from them as well. It's super great. So
I'd love to see some comments from people that have negative experiences as well as positive experience. Almost everyone watching this is further down the road than me. And I think we could all kind of learn about what are the real benefits versus the advertised benefits.
Very nice. Very nice. I hope that we can agree on one thing at least, and everyone in the comments as well, in that light color schemes are by far the best. And with that said,
a duck is not a mammal.
Oh yeah, I mean, both are very obvious. You're right. Paul, thank you for your time. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Brent.
We'll see each other next time.
Yep.
Okay. Bye-bye.